Welcome to Grief Uprooted, a podcast dedicated to sharing your grief stories. Together, we embark on the mystery of one's grief journey as they learn to live, heal, and be courageous in a world rooted in trauma. Join myself, Christine, in an open discussion to help you uproot the grief in all our lives. I am an award winning author, professional speaker, and humanitarian in the field of grief and trauma. I want you to be part of the discussion. When I was a little girl, there was a phrase: if I had a nickel for every time I heard that, I'd be a millionaire. Well, if I had a nickel for every time I heard I'm going crazy, I would be a billionaire, if not a zillionaire. That is something I hear every day on Grief Uprooted. Am I going crazy? So today's episode, we're going to explore those little signs and all these little things that we start to notice when we're grieving that we actually think we're going crazy. We start to see signs and we think like, does that mean something? Like, how come we're perceiving the world so differently? My guest today, it all started by noticing dragonflies continuously. After the death of her husband at such a young age, she started to realize that her career was not where she wanted to be. Her purpose in life, it was not fulfilled. And she started to follow all these little signs that started to appear to her. And while the whole time thinking she's absolutely crazy, she started to embrace these signs. And this led her to being the founder and CEO of Dragonfly Integrated Health. So amazing. It's such an powerful story, and one that's inspiring, that kind of lets you realize that maybe you're not going crazy. Maybe you're just grieving. And for her, this grief was so impactful that she ended up being the founder of Dragonfly Integrated Health. They offer an array of alternative therapies. And in this episode, again, I am super excited to say there's a free offer for you, the listener. You are going to be able to take advantage of the Rebuild and Renew Starter Package. And like I said, for free for you, the listener. So let's go dive in. Let's meet our guest and let's really explore alternative therapies while we're grieving. And maybe let's possibly realize that these signs do have a meaning and you're not going crazy. Let's go. Hello, Susan. And I'm going to try to say it, Susan Edkins. I don't know why I
Yeah.
have such a difficult time with people's last names, as I'm a Nederlanden.
I,
But I never want to screw up anyone's last name because I know what it's like.
yeah.
So excited to have you here. As usual to my listeners, I know a lot of you are wondering like where she's tuning in and what has brought her really to be a guest on Grief Uprooted. So if you can kind of just share what experience you had in your life and where you're tuning in from. We've realized now Zoom makes it so easy where you don't even realize people are tuning in from across the world. And so share a little bit about yourself. What brings you here?
Okay. I am tuning in from southeastern North Carolina,
Mm.
and I have lived in this part of the state for about 32 years. Um, I met you through LinkedIn, so that's kind of how I found out about your podcast. But what attracted me to you and to your podcast is that I became a widow 3.5 years ago. My husband died at the age of 51 of a massive heart attack. And so through my healing journey, I um, started learning more and trying to understand more as I was processing my grief.
That, 51. Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know how long you were married for, but I always found like I'm going to be 53 on Friday. And it's kind of a stage in your life where you're like you're planning that last stage, that
Yes.
last time together. And it's really people, they kind of put it up on a platter and say it's supposed to be wonderful. And this is your retirement years or you're planning for your retirement and everything. So this was completely unexpected.
It was. And the crazy thing is we had gone to the beach the weekend before he passed away, just
Mm.
the two of us. So thankfully none of the kids were at home. I've got three boys ranging in age now from 27 to 13. So the youngest was 10 when my husband died. And thankfully, none of them were at home. But it was kind of crazy because we had talked that weekend about his retirement plans. And, he was a high school principal. So he had told me his big plan for when our youngest, graduated, because he would have been the principal at my son's high school. And his plan was to put him last. And after he announced Landon's name and he got his diploma, he was going to walk off the stage and walk out the back door. And his thing was always he would say deuces. So he was going to say deuces and I'm out and walk off the stage and right out of the auditorium with Landon. So
Wow.
it's just funny that we had talked about that the weekend before he passed away.
For you. Now, what's his name?
Brian.
Brian. So, wow. And where your slip with rage, I can three boys, I'd be raging.
Yes.
I'd be like, oh my
Yes.
goodness, like three boys.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
just being a high school principal, wow. That's a lot. And to be sitting here now with the three boys, and it's only 3 years after. Um,
Yeah.
and what attracted me to yourself was reading that story where you were, it was kind of like, am I crazy? Like, what's happening? And I kind
Yeah.
of loved how you were wording it that am I crazy or is my perception really changing? And I think so many times, I know the people listening, this is like the number one question I always get. And it's hard to explain, like after a profound impact of grief, because I think grief can come in so many different forms, right? We can have grief that just hits us and we're able to integrate it and keep moving. And then we have profound grief like this, it stops everything. Were there things you started to notice change in yourself, your perception, or things that kind of you were like, what the heck?
Well, yeah. So just a couple of days after he passed away, in fact, I think it was the morning that we were going to have people coming to the funeral home. Um, the day before the funeral, but I was walking into Walmart because I needed some waterproof mascara. I knew I wouldn't make it through the afternoon without crying, and I didn't want to have mascara all over my face. So I went early in the morning because I wasn't sleeping, and I was walking in to Walmart, and I heard a song that was kind of one of our songs. It's Break Even by The Script. And it started, it was like really dramatic. Like as soon as I started walking towards the doors, it started. And
Hmm,
I was like,
what the
I've
heck?
never heard a song walking into Walmart before. Um, but it was coming out of the loudspeakers, but I just knew that he was trying to connect with me. So I walk through Walmart, I'm bawling the whole time because I can hear it inside too. I get my mascara, I pay. Nobody says anything to me. I walk out, and when I walk out, it changes to a different song. And the song was I don't know if this is the title, but Everything I Do for You.
Hmm.
And so now I'm standing in the middle of the parking lot recording it on my phone because nobody's going to believe me, right? And I'm just crying and crying. I'm like, okay, I'm losing my mind.
And
And then somehow I ended up driving to the funeral by myself. Everybody the boys, got rides, and all of a sudden I was alone. So I heard song after song that was like, okay, he's trying to talk to me through these songs. Um, so
And I
that
think the song you're talking about, though, because I love it, I
I
think
do too.
it's by Bryan Adams, and I remember it from Robin Hood.
Oh yes,
It was
yes, it
Robin
is
Hood.
Bryan Adams.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
when I got married, I wanted to look like that lady in Robin Hood. So I had a similar wedding dress. And I
Oh,
just
cool.
remember because that is a very, very good song.
Yeah,
But go on. So now you're driving. I love the waterproof mascara. People don't think about that, but
I
when
know.
you grieve and you think about that,
Yeah.
you're driving to the funeral home and you're hearing all these songs.
Yes.
Mm.
And so I just felt like he was communicating with me. So I was calm when I got there and I got out of my car. And one of my best friends was like, "Why are you alone? Well, like, why did nobody drive you?" I'm like, "It's fine. I'm fine."
Yeah.
Funny story, when I got inside, I was talking to one of my husband's best friends and he was mid-sentence and I realized my dress was on backwards. And so I freaked out.
Yeah.
Ran in the bathroom, got it on the right way. And
Things you
then
don't think about. Yep.
I know. And then I just, I constantly do this. And I looked down and was like, oh my God. He's, and he probably had no idea what was going on because I literally turned around and ran to the bathroom. But during the funeral, there was a moment. So my husband's best friend, they used to always, my husband was a big jokester and he would always play jokes on his friends. And this one friend in particular, if he was speaking, my husband would call him, hoping that he had forgotten to turn his phone off, just to mess with them.
Yeah.
And so in the middle of him speaking, all of a sudden it thundered. And I whipped my head around to look at the
Yeah.
boys who were on either side of me. I said, "That's Daddy.
Yeah.
He's one up in David."
He's having a good time.
I know. And you could tell, like when I turned around, you could tell there were people that were like, it just thundered,
Yeah.
because it was sunny outside and it was crazy. But I just knew and I felt very comforted by that. But at the same time, I didn't really want to tell a whole lot of people what, I'm seeing, because the next thing I saw was dragonflies and they were around me. The first time I saw him was I was going to get the oil in his car changed, and it's something that or get it inspected. It's something he would have done. So I was, kind of irritated that I had to go do it because I just didn't like doing those things. And all this dragonfly flies right in front of me, and it's like going back and forth, like it's trying to get my attention. I'm like, okay. And then I started seeing them everywhere.
Yeah.
And the first home football game of the season, they were honoring his memory. And one of the assistant principals was really good friends. She's a good friend of mine. And she was walking us down the track to go out to the 50-yard line because we went out for the coin toss. And all of a sudden, I looked up and there's this like stream of dragonflies. There must have been, I don't know, close to 100 of them. I'm getting chills
Yeah, so
talking
much.
about it now.
Yeah.
And I said, Brooke, look up. There's dragonflies. And she's like, oh my gosh. And
Yeah.
it was just like, like they were supporting us as we were walking. So some of my close friends, I would tell things
Yeah.
like that, like they all know now that dragonflies are my connection to my
Yeah.
husband, and that's why I named my business Dragonfly Integrated Health.
Yeah, it's such a great name. And I was reading what dragonflies meant to you, but before you share that, there is a famous book, Water Bugs to Dragonflies. And so I use butterflies and dragonflies when I'm working with young children because it's a water bug and you're a water bug walking the earth. And then what happens is when you experience grief, you get wings. And so
Oh,
the story talks about how these wings give you the ability to fly and you see things differently. And the cocoon to butterfly is the same analogy where, you're crawling along on Earth and then trauma or grief hits you, one in the same, and all of a sudden you have wings and you're seeing the world differently. And I'll let you share what you've coined dragonflies with because I absolutely love it. But before that, I kind of want to know, like, because I'm curious if you think that those signs are usually there all the time. Is it the enormous amount of human sorrow that has made us shift to go, now I see these things? Where, because so many people come on and talk, and I know myself experiencing the death of my brother, but then my own mortality, like, hey, you might die too. All of a sudden, the everything seemed to just, I can't even, it sounds insane, but the world just went
It
like
shifts.
yeah,
Yeah,
they
it
call it a
absolutely shifts.
paradigm. Yeah, a paradigm shift. But as a
Yeah.
child, I remember going like it shifted, and I literally felt crazy because they usually depict that in horror films or crazy films where they're like the person all of a sudden. But it was like all of a sudden I noticed the things people don't notice. And some people, a song, a dragonfly, a butterfly is irrelevant. When you're walking the earth as that caterpillar, or you're in the water as a water bug. But the moment you can fly, you see it all. Like,
See it from a different perspective.
yeah. So
Yeah.
do you think you like these things are there all the time, or do you think that it only appears with grief? I'm curious.
Um, so I do think that the universe is sending us signs. I think our loved ones are communicating with us all the time. I didn't know about that before my husband died.
Yeah.
And so I think yeah, maybe grief is what makes you notice. Like I said, thought I was going crazy too, and I confided in some of my close friends, and one of them recommended a book. Let me think what it was called. I think it's called Signs from the Universe.
Mm.
And so I read that book, and then that one suggested in Amazon, it suggested another book for me
Mhm.
after I read that one. And the other one is, I think it's called or How to Communicate with Your Loved Ones,
Yep.
or I'm
Yep.
Still Communicating.
Yep.
And so after I read those, I was like, okay, I'm not going crazy.
Yeah.
These things are here. And I think once you see them, you cannot unsee them
So true.
because I started noticing different things. Like I was seeing vultures, which I thought was really morbid.
Mhm.
But I realized that it doesn't have to be that. Like, I gave it a morbid interpretation, but that it can be a symbol of death, but it also can be a symbol of resurrection.
Yeah.
So,
And I love that because I found that I kind of flew in that direction too, that now I use these signs like so many times to guide me. Like when
yeah.
people are like, "Oh, what are you doing tomorrow and how are things going?" Grief Uprooted, Roberts Press, other corporations that I have, they're simply guided by me following the universe and trying to explain to people that there are signs there, and if you slow this mind down and you allow yourself to reflect, the answers are in you. And but that takes a lot of training of the oneself, a lot of deep diving within, and trying to really trust yourself that you're not
Yeah.
going crazy. So before we jump into your first Reiki session, what do dragonflies mean?
So I've seen a couple of different things. One was transformation. So for me, kind of my husband moving to the other side was a transformation. Me moving on without him much earlier than I expected to do. And I've also seen that dragonflies have two sets of wings for angels to fly on them. And so that one really resonated with me
Mhm.
and just really made me feel comforted.
I love that one. I read that and I was just like, oh, that's so beautiful and
I
so
know I didn't make it up,
so
but
true
I
though,
love it.
right? somebody really inspected this dragonfly, and I thought
Yes.
that's so great, so great. So what was your like what? So you obviously had a job when your husband passed,
Yes.
and so this started to become very unfulfilling, and you decided to kind of go explore things. So what was your first thing that you explored?
So I was going to a couple of different grief support groups. I tried a couple of different things, and I had this moment where I realized that while I was in the grief group, my legs would start to hurt
Hmm.
and it would get very uncomfortable and I felt like I needed to move. And when it was done, the rest of the night my legs would be uncomfortable. And so I happened to mention it to my medical doctor, who was a functional provider, and she said, "It sounds like you have stuck energy." I'm like, "Okay, I don't know what that means." She said, "Well, would you be open to trying Reiki?" I'm like, "I guess. I don't know what it is."
This
Like,
is very forward for a medical doctor.
yeah,
This-
yeah. Well, she's a functional doctor.
yeah.
But anyway, so I'm like, sure, I'll try it. I was really open to holistic um things. I've been open to that for a long time, but I had not really heard of Reiki, or maybe I heard of it but didn't really know what it was. And she said, well, it can move the energy. You can get the energy unstuck.
Yeah.
And I knew a little bit about chakras. And so I read about the root chakras, kind of like your foundation
Yeah.
and, money and your job and all those things. And so I'm like, well, that makes sense. Because I lost my husband, I was, concerned about being a single mom and all of that. So it made sense. I'm like, sure, I'll try it. So she recommended somebody and, I went and I knew the first time, and I can't even really explain it.
I know.
Um, I just felt better. And I knew when I was done with that first session, I'm like, I want to learn how to do this. And so I went back a couple weeks later and I had another session. And after that one, I'm like, I want to do this for my job. Like, this is what, I want to do something more
Mhm.
fulfilling. I am still working in my full-time job for now, and starting my business on the side, but it is definitely my plan to make this my full-time job.
I
I've
know.
been able to incorporate a lot of what I've learned, though, with my students. I'm a college instructor, and so I'm able to use a lot of what I've learned with my students. So that's kind of cool too. I'm
That is,
exposing them to new ways of thinking.
yeah, like, and coming from that educational background. And I think that's what's kind of so great about your story that, your husband, yourself, and even though it's a functional doctor, these are people that usually don't lean towards alternative therapies. And
Yeah.
I know when I was younger, I didn't realize what I was even doing. I had a school guidance counselor hand me Shirley MacLaine's open-eyed meditation tape. And I fell in love with it. And it was you watched all the fancy colors on TV, and she talked about all your chakras and lining up. So this got me through my whole young adult life. And I then wrote a book. All of my whole career took off. And I just regularly watched this meditation tape. I even watched it before birth because I had all natural births.
Oh, wow.
I was fascinated, but I never went beyond that. And what really struck me was my friends were all like, let's go to yoga. We would get into yoga. I'm bawling. And I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with me. And I know all of you are listening right now, and I've gotten a lot better in my episodes because I am usually crying in every episode. And that's because I truly can feel what's happening, right? And so I've been learning as these episodes go on I always just talk through my tears because it's truly relating to another individual going, wow, And sometimes you're blindsided when you have a guest on and you haven't pre-interviewed them. And that's what I love about Grief Uprooted. I want someone to come on, be fresh and share their story. So after yoga, I gave yoga up. This is horrible. I'm in a room of people just bawling and you're twisting me like a pretzel. And I went to Reiki. And my very first session, all I could describe it as was an out of body experience. I got on the table and I was capable of diving deep within myself and tapping into my inner child, my childhood, and I felt my whole body just start releasing. And my breathing switched. I started crying, but I wasn't in the body. It just did that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
um, I went back and went back and went back and was like, holy crap, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And and I was just completely shocked, which, catapulted me now in I'm a little behind you, but in March getting my Reiki Masters because it was all of a sudden everything went bing 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 bing. Like all of a sudden I realized, oh my goodness, this is what I've been doing on a Shirley MacLaine tape. This is what I'm doing with other people. I'm feeling their energy. And
Yeah.
the door was opened at a very early age for me, and I didn't even know what it was. So after going to all these sessions and experiencing Reiki, what was your next thing? Like then you decide to explore and get educated in it?
Yes, I did. I knew after that second time that I wanted to learn how to use Reiki to help other people. And it took a while for me to take the class, and I ended up taking through master teacher level.
Mhm.
But it was, a process
Yeah.
to do all that. And so, I just looked at it as my form of self-care. So while I'm waiting to learn how to do it, and as I'm learning to use it, then I continued to go for sessions for myself because it was really helping me to process things. And what I thought was cool about it, and early on I really didn't understand it, and I'm
Yeah.
still I don't know that I fully understand it, but it works.
Yeah.
So I'm willing to do something that helps me to feel better. But the person that I went to became a mentor to me too. But she explained that whatever is ready to be released is
Hmm.
going to release. And so, I was able sometimes to release things that I didn't have to talk about and I didn't have to necessarily, you know, bring up and open up and look at. I could get rid of some of the heaviness that I was feeling
Hmm.
and not have to drag up
Hmm.
negative feelings or more sadness. So it wasn't that I wasn't dealing with my grief. I just was able to process a lot of things without having to,
Hmm. Well, I think
drag out all the negative stuff.
yeah, and I think people think about the rumination process where you're just re doing your story over and over and over and
Yeah,
over again, and it serves a purpose. But they don't realize is that that energy that goes when you start telling your story, you start shaking, you start going, like you were just saying, I felt goosebumps.
yeah,
And it's like, okay, you're feeling the goosebumps. It's having a physical effect on you.
yeah,
So the more you ruminate, the more you're getting rid of. But that body still has a physical feeling. And I found with Reiki that it just allowed me to release. And then
yes,
what's great about a great Reiki master is, do you want to talk about this now? Would you like to
yes,
discuss this? And you can. And there were things that I experienced that I thought that was super special. I don't want to discuss it. And then there were
yeah,
things that I was like, oh, wow, what did that mean? And, so I think that it has its place in healing grief. And I think it's a thing we kind of overlook. We think that, well, we'll just overlook that part of grief. And just people don't look at it as being trapped in the body. but
Yeah,
it really is. It integrates into you. It's not something you can just say, okay, I'm going to get rid of it. It integrates in the body and it changes who you are. And I really think it
absolutely.
can change the makeup of your body also.
Yes.
So with this energy, today's episode is sponsored by Dragonfly Integrated Health. You can visit them online at dragonflyintegratedhealth.com. They offer alternative health treatments for the grieving. They offer an array of energy healing. Some of the therapies that they offer, we are discussing in this episode, but I wanted to bring them to your attention. It's Reiki energy for animals, hypnotherapy, integrated energy therapy, and intuitive card reading. They are offering to all Grief Uprooted listeners for 30 days of the air date of this episode, the Rebuild and Renew Starter Package. What I love about this is you are going to receive a 30-minute free discovery session. This is kind of a discussion of your grief journey and some of your goals. You're going to have access to a guided meditation. These are recorded and tailored to grief transformation. So you'll have access to all these recordings. Also, receive a 20% discount on your first one-on-one hypnotherapy or energy medicine session. Now, this is again only offered to Grief Uprooted listeners. And how you would receive this offer and be able to book your discovery session for free is you're going to use the code Uprooted20. Again, it's Uprooted20 to be able to redeem the Rebuild and Renew Starter Package. This is such a great offer. I know that I have shared myself that I am becoming a Reiki master, looking at somatics practitioner, and pulling the energy healing into exactly what I do as a grief and trauma recovery specialist. So it's so fun to team up with the Dragonfly Integrated Health and be able to explore this all with you and offer you these services and offer them to you literally for free. So again, visit dragonflyintegratedhealth.com and take advantage of this great special of Rebuild, Renew Starter Package for you. It might just be exactly what you need to start moving a little bit forward in your grief journey. Let's get back to the episode. What did we kind of talked about the benefits that it has with giving us that ability to release, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the types of energy modalities that you do, because I did see, I think it's hypnotherapy or hypnotherapy.
Hypnotherapy.
And I was kind of like, oh, wow, that sounds like all of them sound
Yeah.
very interesting.
So that was actually the next thing that I experienced and then decided that I wanted to get trained in. It's kind of like a guided meditation,
Mm,
but you're a little bit deeper, not asleep, but you're able to, like, I can guide somebody to tap into their subconscious mind, because we have all the answers to any questions that we have inside of us. We just have to get past our ego and past our, monkey mind to
mhm,
be able to tap into that wisdom. And so I loved that it was a way to very quickly, sometimes it can be really quickly
mhm,
shifting your thinking pattern. Like we
mhm,
get stuck in these negative thinking patterns, and like you said, that creates um, dis-ease in our body, which eventually creates disease. It will manifest because the trauma does stay in our body.
mhm,
The other technique that I learned is integrated energy therapy, and that
mhm,
is specifically to help release trauma. There's 9 energy centers. It's to me pretty similar to Reiki, like a similar concept, but there's 9 energy centers that store different emotions. They each have an emotion. And so it's kind of like a little bucket. And as you experience that emotion, you add to that bucket and eventually it spills over. And then that's what causes
mhm,
physical issues in our body, or sometimes mental issues, anxiety, depression, those kinds of things. So the integrated energy therapy is a way to release the stored energy in those energy centers, and it releases again those memories. So even if you've gone through something and you feel like you've already dealt with it, sometimes that energy, like you were just saying, is still trapped in the body in
Mhm.
some place. And so you can use that integrated energy therapy to release the that stored energy, the stored memories.
Yeah, and I think because so many times people will come on and say, well, I got to acceptance, which I don't even believe is a part of grief. I think resilience would be a better word. I
Yeah,
know how to bounce back. I don't think I want to accept how horrifying grief is. But there is a sense of this is happening and I have to accept it. But I think sometimes that body is carrying it and it tweaks the memory, which causes the brain to pull it
yeah,
back. And then they're like, well, now why am I back here? And sometimes I think by having that rumination, the journaling, verbally expressing yourself, if that's how you want to do it, and then combining that with these alternative therapies of allowing the body to release too, then
yeah.
we're really eliminating the triggers so that we can pull the memory forward, but the body isn't physically reacting. So
Right.
we're not collapsing, right? But I don't think because grief is so under discovered and talked about that people haven't really correlated those two together yet. We're starting to. We're starting to
Yeah,
realize the physical body is carrying this. This is why stress is causing so many illnesses. This is why trauma is,
yeah.
all of it is causing grief. Um, but I love how you experience something. You're a true educator, and then you want to go learn. It's like
I
I
know.
love this. Now I want to learn how to
Yeah,
why does this work and how does this work? The hypnotherapy too. I know on the retreat for my Reiki 1 and 2, we did things like that. And I
yes,
found that I didn't realize that was a thing of itself because I just thought, wow, how does this person have this ability? Our trainer was, and our master was able to walk us through. And I loved that, creating my
yes.
own little world, listening and seeing where I ended up and how I went.
Yeah.
Um, but a thing we did after that, which I see you offer online, is that intuitive reading. Um, because I think that comes with this when you tap into your energy sources. Um, at this event that I attended, it was a multi-day retreat.
Hmm.
After we would do this hypnotherapy or guided meditation, then everybody would go around the room and kind of offer up what intuitively was coming. And I was impressed on how accurate people were.
Yeah.
Um, so,
Yeah, I think that that was part of the Reiki experience that I had too, that really helped bring me a lot of comfort. But I do think that I usually do my intuitive readings with oracle cards.
yes.
And I bought myself, this was early, like probably 6 months before I discovered Reiki, I had bought angel cards for
Mm.
my birthday. It was my first birthday after my husband died, and my middle son actually helped me pick the angel cards. I was trying to decide between angel cards and tarot. And he's like, well, I've got tarot cards. If you ever want to use mine, why don't you get the angel cards? I said, okay, well, that's what I was leaning towards. And so that again was super comforting. I would pull a card and journal about what's coming up. I think journaling is a really good way to process our feelings as well.
Yeah, I have coaching cards that they have like a picture and a word. And I was using them with when I would do larger groups or corporations to work with people, and then was introduced to Oracle cards. But I love them to just help people think about their grief differently too.
Yeah.
Being able to choose them and say, what are you seeing? What are you feeling when you see this picture or you see this?
Yeah.
Does it
What
remind
does it bring up?
Yeah,
Yes.
like just being able to tap into that. The other thing I saw that you did that I want to touch on is animals. This is such a I think animals bring such a healing to you,
Yes.
but I
Yeah.
think there is an energy within them that's what we're naturally attracted to. You know,
Yeah.
that's what we're attracted to is that.
So I believe our animals choose us.
Hmm.
And I also believe, so our family dog died a couple of months before my husband did. Actually died the weekend of my husband's birthday. And we didn't let our youngest son see the dog. We got the dog out of there before he woke up. And he was really, really upset with me, well, with both of us for not letting him say goodbye to the dog. Well, fast forward, when my husband died, my son wanted to see him.
Yeah,
And I would not, I don't know that I would have let him see my husband if we hadn't had that experience with the dog and had that discussion.
yeah,
And so I believe that our animals choose us, and I think that a lot of times when they get sick, it's because they're taking up our stress and our energy and helping us out. So we actually found a new dog. We were looking, my husband had called the day before he died about a dog that we found. And so, he gave his phone number and it just got lost in the shuffle. I don't know if they ever called us back about that dog, but my youngest said after my husband died, he's like, we don't need a dog right now. We just need to be not having to worry about a dog right now. I said, okay. Well, then he started getting ready and we found one, or
mm,
she found us, I guess.
yeah,
But yeah, I think that a lot, the Reiki can help them if they're in physical pain. I've used it mostly for animals that were anxious.
mm,
And it makes a big difference. And uh, you can do all of these things at a distance.
yeah,
And there was a cat that was a neighborhood cat that was tormenting my mom and her cats. Her cats were indoor and this one was outdoor, but it was like, stalking. And I actually sent Reiki to that cat to try to calm it down and keep it away from her house. But I also gave her cats Reiki to try to help them not to be as afraid of that cat. It
yeah.
just was kind of interesting.
Well, and I think that again, when you look at animals, if you don't allow them to get their energy out, they go nuts. They start eating your
Yes.
couch. They start eating your wall,
Yes.
right? And people are like, that's just a physical energy. Well, I remember when I was first introduced to grief in animals and like an animal grieving. And I was new to my career. I was young. And the Humane Society called and said, we have this dog. And we found him sitting on his owner's lap. His owner died. And
Oh,
the dog is just sitting in this cage, shaking. And so it was ready to be put down because nobody could go near it. And it was a little Pomeranian, the same color as my hair,
oh,
and it looked like it had not been bathed in a long time. So they said, can you come and work with the dog? And I remember thinking, I work with children. And I'm like, I don't work with dogs. And then I thought, oh, well, what's the difference? Like, some children are very verbal, some children are not. So
yeah,
I went in and I sat in this big, massive cold cage, and they opened the door and I said, I'm just going to sit here. And I said, he's a Pomeranian. He's not going to be able to hurt too much here. So I started talking, and the
yeah,
dog just started going, hmm, hmm. And then I went, I want to go for a walk. And so I left the door open and I walked, and the dog followed me. And long and behold, at this Humane Society, I did not know they had a pet graveyard. So I'm walking
wow,
outside going, oh, it's a graveyard, right? And I'm talking away to the dog. And I sit on a bench and he jumps up next to me. And I look down and there's this dog named Cujo, which is like from the killer Stephen King.
Yes,
And I'm
yes, I
like,
remember that movie.
oh, and he just tilted his head and I went, you want to come home? And I went in and they go, you don't even need to fill out the paperwork. It's your dog. Took this thing home.
I was going to say, I hope
Absolutely.
you took it home.
Absolutely loved it. Lived for years, but he was so bad. He just
Yeah,
barked at everyone. And I remember the kids coming in going, what is this? And it was like, you couldn't even see its face. And I'm like, it's a Pomeranian, I think. But I was like, I feel his energy. I could, and that's
yeah,
when I think these animals do. And I think that energy, once you tap into it and you've experienced grief, because so many times people are like, grief is awful. Grief is, and on Grief Uprooted, I want people to realize it's awful. Like it's horrible, but it's a human condition that we have to live through.
right.
So if we're going to live through it, let's realize that through living through this, you've realized these amazing abilities you have, that this
Yeah.
energy
Well,
exists.
stuff that I never knew existed.
Yeah.
I think that's the cool thing. Like, I never would have done any of this
Yeah.
if I had not lost my husband and I was trying to make sense of, why I lost him so young and where was he?
Yeah.
How was he? I was just trying to understand.
Yeah.
Um, and I've met so many amazing people and I've learned so many
Mhm.
amazing things. Something that you said at the beginning of talking about that dog or talking about the animals, with how they shake themselves,
Yeah.
that is something that we really need to learn how to do. Like
Yeah.
it can reset when we're grieving, it impacts our autonomic nervous system and it affects our vagus nerve. And the shaking that the animals do,
Yeah.
that releases that, cortisol or the adrenaline that they've had this spike. It kind of gets it
Makes you
out
go,
and
oh,
gets them back to
I'm good.
normal. And
Yeah.
we don't know how to do that.
Yeah. And maybe we did because we are
Yeah,
animals too, right? And
true.
I think we've lost sight of all
Yes.
of this by even taking it out of traditional things like people don't wear bereavement bands anymore. These are all things I think we had that we were able to go, hey, that person's grieving. And you were just a little softer in your approach. You were kinder. But you give it all back. I know right now you give it all back for Brian to come back, right?
Oh, yeah,
In a
definitely.
second. So don't misunderstand that. But when you're in the situation, this is what you're experiencing.
Yeah,
So
yes.
another question I have for you, and my last is, how do you know like what is good? Like if somebody, I know you're offering the Rebuild and Renew starter package, which people can learn about that in this episode. There is a commercial that will tell you all about it. But with saying that, I kind of wanted to know, like, how do you know what's the right energy healing for a person? Is that really kind of discovered in that free discovery session, or how do
Yes,
you
that
kind of?
is something that we can figure out. Sometimes it's based on the goals. Sometimes people are not really interested in hypnotherapy, and
Mhm.
the energy is maybe a good way to kind of dip your toe in. It's a little bit maybe more comfortable. Some people are nervous about having hypnotherapy, but it really is just like a deep guided meditation. And obviously I've tried a whole lot of things. I think you try
Yeah,
things out and you'll know if it resonates with you, you'll know that that's something that is meant for you and you can continue to do it. And there's so many different modalities out there, sound healing and tapping, EFT.
yeah,
There's so many things out there
you
that
can.
you can try. We interrupt this podcast for a dirty moment. So my dirty moment would be hearing the song Don't Stop Believing. It was my husband's favorite song, and every time I hear it, I know he's communicating with me. And it always brings me comfort, but some days it makes me cry. And I let the tears flow, and I know that I'm releasing what needs to be released then. And I usually sing with it. I'll take a picture if it was, on my car, on my phone. And I used to do that every single time. I don't do that quite as much, but I liked to keep track of the moments when I knew he was communicating with me.
Yeah, I know for tapping, even for the dentist, I'm nervous of the dentist.
Yeah,
Continuously tap. And once I learned that technique, I was like, oh, this is great. I'm nervous.
yeah,
I'll just tap
I
the
use it too.
and I can just put myself in a state and go do whatever you got to do. That's so awesome. And I think that people need to realize too that it is something like I find when I'm learning a new modality or I'm doing it, like for the longest time, I was working on my inner child that was introduced to me in
Yeah,
therapy. And I was like, oh, who's this little girl? She seems a little mixed up. Right? And then
yeah,
I was like, wow, I didn't even know that existed. Wondered what that was.
yeah.
And once I dove into the inner child, and I dove in for quite some time. But then there was all of a sudden, I don't need this anymore.
It's a completion. Yep, you
Yeah,
know
and
that.
and I think people get scared. Well, I'm going to have to stay in alternative therapies for a long period of time.
Yeah,
I think that's a misunderstanding of therapy, of coaching, of alternative therapies. I think people are completely misunderstanding. This is just for as long as you need it. This
yeah,
isn't something that you use a perfect word, a completion. You're ready to release and move on.
yeah.
And I think that's healthy.
I
Because
do
I just,
too.
yeah, I found that all of a sudden I'm like, I don't need to know this anymore. I feel good in myself and I move on and then look at what's the next thing I can get into,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yes.
um, you're amazing.
Oh,
And
thank you.
I've loved having you on, and I thank you for your candidness and your openness too, because it's only 3 years. That's fresh.
Yeah,
That
it is fresh.
and three boys at home. Are all three still living at home?
No, so my two, I've got a big gap between number two and number three. There's 10 years between them. So that made it even harder. It was just the two of us
Yeah.
still at home when my husband died.
Mhm.
So yes. I think that the experiencing the things like the first thing that happened was my middle son graduating from college without my husband. And those are the types of things I think that kind of bring things up. And not only am I grieving, but my kids are grieving, and I have to give them the support and
Yeah.
the space to be able to do that. And sometimes that's hard to know what to do too.
Yeah. And that's so true because they all grieve differently.
Yes.
They all
Yeah.
have different needs. So you kind of like the one wanting to see the body, another one may not.
Yeah. Two of them wanted to, and the other one was like, I am not going anywhere near.
Yeah.
But it was my middle son. And he's like, and he tells the younger one, can you tell daddy this, this, and this? I'm like, don't make him do that. I'll
You go
tell
in,
daddy those things.
go in and do my dirty work. I'm just
Right.
right? He's actually kind
Yeah.
of smart. Well, and I encourage people to write letters. I say if you want to write
Yes.
a letter, can place it with, so I think you're doing great. I think
Thank
that,
you.
you're really handling this well. And in the notes and everything for everybody out there, everything is in there. I will have the special put there too. You've also heard a commercial that's offering it up today. And so I just can't thank you enough. And I love
Thank
everything you're
you.
doing. And your website is dragonflyintegratedhealth.com.
Yes.
And to everybody out there, thank you for tuning in. And as usual, it is not alone that we grieve, it is only together that we heal. Take care, everybody. Bye. Grief Uprooted professional grief and empowerment coaching are not to be used as a substitute for professional advice by legal, medical, financial, business, spiritual, or other qualified professionals. All our products and services are designed for grief empowerment through learning and sharing of one's lived experiences.